Let's hit it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Woodworth, and I'm here today welcoming you to the K-12 Corner with Byron Sanders, who has agreed to join me today. Thank you, Byron Sanders.
You're welcome, Diane.
Superintendent at Baugo Community Schools. Longtime friend and colleague, actually, so this is fun.
Absolutely.
So,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I know we've been meaning to do this, and so it's fun to get together and talk.
Yes,
so,
it is.
All right.
So I appreciate you.
You got it.
Being willing. All right, so our topic today is mostly discussing what it's like to navigate a school construction project, because you're doing a big one here right now.
We are.
As an administrator. And then we might branch off into other things, but that would be our basic scope for today.
Well, we'll do our best. How about
that?
All
right. Sounds great.
All right.
But let's start by introducing you a little bit to people. So why don't you tell us about your career so far, the things you've done, and how you managed to end up here at Baugo as the superintendent?
All right. Well, this is probably 26, 27 years in the business. Began as a rookie in South Bend schools as a classroom teacher, and I taught at 4 of the high schools. I was one of those Plan Z teachers, if anybody in the community recognizes Joan Raymond's model for Plan Z and reorganization of that school corporation. That was almost 30 years ago. And so there was a philosophy that a teacher is a teacher is a teacher. Those were her words. And so she didn't care if we needed to be relocated each year in order to maintain the efficiencies in the district. And absolutely that happened. And so in 5 years, I was in 4 high schools, and each one of those years required a reduction in force. And so as a young teacher trying to establish a family, we were worried a lot about stability, which that led me to pursue an administrative license, just so we had choice. Little did I know that the ink on that license wouldn't even dry, and I was picked up as an assistant principal. And so I've served 20 years in an administrative capacity, either as an assistant principal or a principal. I've served as principal of 3 different buildings. And then in the last 6 years, I've served as superintendent for Baugo Community Schools. And so it's my 8th year with Baugo. I came from Washington High School as head principal there, and in South Bend, and then became principal of Jimtown High School for 2 years when Jim Du Bois was former superintendent here, now the superintendent of Goshen, had retired from our district, and I was named superintendent. So here we are.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that. And what did you teach when you were a classroom teacher?
I was a social studies teacher.
Okay, right.
I was, and loved that dearly. I don't think I ever had a bad day in the classroom. I really didn't. In fact, I think I have 4 teachers that work for me here now that were my students when I was a classroom teacher, and so I love that. That's neat. And so somehow I had some impact, I think, and I found some way to get them here and work with me, and so. Pretty proud of that.
As you should be. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. So
that's how. What do you think inspired you to become a teacher to start with?
I grew up in the late '80s, early '90s when I was coming out of high school, and in that era, I worked in a blue collar town, or lived in a blue collar town, Gary, Indiana, and my dad was a steel worker. He suffered through the reductions of the steelworking industry and ended up losing a job during the reductions of the mills. And so he ended up moving out of the steel industry into chemical industry, where he retired. So he kind of came out unscathed. But what he learned from that is he thought his son needed to go to college. Weren't really sure how that happened or what you should study, but pursuing a college education seemed really important to our family. And so that's what I did. And the thing I did was look for people who I knew were college educated. And the ones that I knew that were college educated were my teachers. And so as a result of that, I thought, well, if that's what it takes to get a college education, I'll be a teacher and go to college and do that. And that's really as simple as it was. They were the professionals in my life, and I modeled their behavior.
Awesome.
So those teachers matter, and I hope we still do today.
I know it. I hope so too. That's our hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe it. I do believe it.
I do too. I wouldn't still be in the business if I didn't.
So what projects have you overseen as an administrator?
Done it a couple different ways. As a building level administrator, I was tasked with kind of overseeing projects on campus when they were occurring. And so we built a math wing at Washington High School. I was part of that. And so I attended all of those construction meetings and kind of got an idea of what that looked like and how cumbersome that was, and really the impact on the teachers and the building level administrators during construction, and all those things that had to happen in order for a school to function fluidly. And that's a complicated mess. And I didn't have to worry much about the financing. I was more worried about the logistics. And so I had a place at the table during that process. I thought that was important. I always make sure today as a district level administrator, if we're impacting a building, we absolutely have to have those people at the table early and regularly being communicated with to make sure that our building level administrators know what's going on, because they're the ones that have to tell the story, and they're the ones that have to make sure that the school can function, and that's important. So I had that experience. Happened as well when I arrived here in Jimtown. We were at a point where we were beginning to do some significant renovation. Started out as cosmetic, and so in my earlier tenure, we were doing cosmetic renovations at the high school, and we did the junior high and elementary, and then just I think last year or the year before, we cosmetically renovated our newest school, the intermediate building, and we just had a refresh on that building. And so we had those experiences. Put a couple project lead the way classrooms in because that became fashionable. We actually renovated, of all things, a foods class, because it was really important to our community, and our classroom was tired, and so we renovated that space. So you have to pay attention to what the needs are of your community and respond to that. We've done some other physical improvements, HVAC. Did almost nearly a megawatt of solar power renovation on this campus, so that was a big deal. And so we were kind of paying attention to cost-saving measures and what we could do to improve efficiencies on campus and save a little money. Electricity isn't getting any cheaper, and so that was a project that we were inspired by. And we've done some other things to be competitive. We put a turf field in, and actually extended the use of that space into both spring and fall, where you're often waiting for a football field to dry out. We can use that at any time that it's warm enough to be on it now, and so that was a winner. But today we're working on $28 million project, and unique to us, I think, is that it's not just a singular project of $28 million. It's 23 projects embedded in a large project, and that had lots of moving parts, and still has moving parts, and lots of complexities that we're grateful to Wygan for participating with us on. So
wow. So listening to you talk about that, you've got quite a wealth of experiences in construction of schools, actually.
I didn't really think about that until you gave me the question that I was going to be asked before the podcast, and I got to thinking about all the little things that we've done, and they do add up.
They do add up.
And when you think about it from our role as superintendents, it doesn't matter if it's a small project or a large project. Generally, either you're going to be impacting your operations budget, or you're going to be impacting a bond. And when you're selling a bond, it looks the same way if it's $1 million or $28 million. The bond process is the same, and so we have had a lot of experience with that over the last few years to kind of perfect that process and the strategies for making sure that you can do that without great controversy, because that's always a challenge.
Yes, it is. Right. So that kind of leads into, what are some important factors you think to consider before pursuing a construction job?
I think the first thing you need to do is think about need. What is the need? Are we doing this because we want to do it, or are we doing this because we need to do it? When the state of Indiana is telling us that we need to be thinking more efficiently, and even indicating that there may be some tax constraints on school corporations, you really have to think about need. I think sometimes you have to think about scope. And so is this a project that you could do more sparingly, or is this a project that needs to be as complicated and as big as maybe as you would like? And you don't do that on your own. You certainly do that through conversation and active work with your board. Superintendents would make a big mistake by trying to do something like that without seeking guidance and collaboration with their community. And your board is your first point of contact. They represent the community. They're elected by their community, and they want to act in the best interest of the community. And so working regularly with the board to make sure you don't make silly mistakes, pretty important. We calendar time each year, both in the fall and the spring, to talk only about capital projects, and we make sure that we are hitting our marks. When I arrived 6 years ago, we had 65 priority projects. in our list of things that needed to be attended to on campus. And
Uh-huh.
so over that time, we've tailored that down to about 23.
Mhm.
23, ironically, 23 of those projects have been queued into the YGAN project.
Yeah.
So we have others,
Mhm.
and every time you turn around, there's something being added to that. I'm hearing a rumor that I need to worry about a roof, and so there's always something to be
Yes.
added to the queue.
Mhm.
But hopefully, through some good planning and active collaboration with your board, you can get those things scheduled and maintain the property. And so that's important to us. So.
Mhm. Yeah, well said, well said. And I think maintenance of facilities it's just ongoing.
Right.
And I've heard, sometimes it's hard for taxpayers to realize, like, well, we're taking on more debt. Usually it's because there's debt rolling off that we can afford to do that. And, like if you're a homeowner, the common wisdom is like by the time you retire, you should have your mortgage paid off.
Correct.
But a school never retires.
Correct. Not only that, but I
Yeah.
think, and it's a good analogy because I think sometimes we think about how do schools function financially, and it's
Right.
almost like the reverse mortgage model.
That's true.
And so that's how
true.
we want to maintain debt so
Mhm.
that we have
Yes.
capacity to
Mhm.
maintain the facilities.
That's
Now, I think
right.
there's always a limit to that, and I think your
Yes.
community is going to tell you what's acceptable and what's not.
Mhm.
And I think we need to act in the best interest of the community's interest,
Right.
and you do that
Right.
through your collaboration with your board. But
Right.
ultimately, we have to maintain facilities. Your schools and your churches tend to be the centers of your community,
That's right.
and you want your facilities and your schools to speak loudly about you. And so we want them to be the best they can be. We want them to be competitive. The market for schools is changing and evolving, and what we we are a small community school district. We're proud of that. We love that image,
Yep.
but we also need to maintain enrollment, and we want to make sure that people want to send their children to us. And we like it when people from outside of
Yes.
our community want to send their children to us,
Yes.
but we really need to make sure that we're maintaining our envelope and
Mhm.
know that
Right.
we're giving the very best facilities possible to the community. Their kids deserve it. My kids live here. My kids
Yeah.
deserve it.
Absolutely.
My taxpayer dollars are here, and I want them
Yes.
spent well.
That's
And
right.
so we take all that seriously.
That's right. Yeah, and just when you were talking about, you heard the rumor about a new roof, like a district that I was in previously, wasn't keeping up with their roofs. And you know what? If you don't take care of that at the right time, then moisture gets in there, and it's a lot more expensive to fix it later.
Absolutely.
So there's that whole problem.
I
too.
would, especially young administrators or new administrators,
Yeah.
we see a lot of turnover in this role.
Yes, we do.
And it's one of the first things I think you need to do is talk to your team about, do you have maintenance
Yeah.
schedules in place?
Yes.
Are you monitoring those? Are you prioritizing things that are seen and unseen? Because
Yes.
sometimes there's a
Right.
lot of things that you want
Right.
to put out in front because everybody likes to see the shiny.
That's right.
But there's a lot of things that you need to do to
Right.
protect the envelope, and we have to
Yeah.
do those with integrity regularly. Sometimes you can do those things differently than maybe what someone may want to market to you. So, for example, we recently put HVAC systems in one of our buildings, and we could have upgraded that system to very modern systems, but we couldn't afford it.
Right.
But we could replace exactly what we had with new products,
Sure.
and it saved a lot of money in the process. And we
Sure.
were able to keep our our envelope strong
Yeah.
and keep our
Right.
facilities working well. And so it was a win all the way around. Saved a little money.
Yep.
And got accomplished what we needed to get accomplished.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, good. You hit on a bunch of really important things there. Good for you. So, what would you say? What challenges can arise like before you go into the building phase? Like you've already alluded to some of
Sure.
them, but what would those be?
well, I think the first and foremost, I think the pitfall is that we think we can do these things fast, and they take time. I'm thinking about the project we're working on right now with YGAN. That's 23 projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think we worked on the development of that plan for 2 or 2.5 years with our board.
Mm-hmm.
All the way back to we knew we were going to have capacity
Yep.
falling off because our intermediate school was
Mhm.
being paid for. And so
Yep.
that debt had come off,
Yep.
and we needed to reclaim that debt. And so we knew we were going to have some opportunity to do some improvements on campus. We also knew, because we keep a list of priorities,
Mhm.
we had a series of things that really needed to get done. And so we needed to work actively with our board to talk through that. We needed to be working with our financial advisors to be making good decisions about how to
Mhm.
secure funds, when to
Mhm.
secure those funds, Should we do those in more than one bond sale?
Right. And how
Should
does that affect the tax rates for the community?
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
what you really don't want to
Right.
be is the superintendent who raises taxes.
No, you do not.
If you can afford or
Right.
afford to avoid that, you should
Yes.
do that.
Right.
And
Right.
so, you have to have all the answers to those questions and bring those to your board. Bring the consequences
Right.
to the board so that they can see, if we do X, this is the
Mhm.
consequence. If we do Y, this is the
Mhm.
consequence. And then you should assume that there's going to be public input, good and bad, around every decision that you make.
That's right.
And so when you're
Right.
making improvements to campus, you better believe there's going to be people that think you should have and you should have done it earlier. And there are going to be people that think you're spending money unnecessarily. And so those are also realities. And so
Right.
that's why it's so very important that you're protecting the board's interests and their
Mhm.
integrity, and that you're
Mhm.
telling them the truth so that they
Absolutely.
can defend their actions. And so some important realities.
Absolutely, which leads to another question. How do you go about communicating all this to the community? Yes, you start with the board, you're a
Sure.
representative of the community, but then how do you do the rest of that?
I think there's two things. I think the first one is that you have to make sure that you're honoring the board's strategic plan. And
Mhm.
so early on, when we arrived here, we worked collaboratively with our board to establish a strategic plan that we follow. And it's in its 6th year. It's had 2
Wow.
iterations, but it's
Mhm.
been maintained. And the first of those is safe and orderly schools, which I know you're probably going to ask me about because I saw the question.
Yes.
You're going to ask
Go right
about
ahead.
safe and orderly
Yes.
schools,
Yes.
and so, but that is the school district's first priority, and
Mhm.
so and we have to honor that. So being very clear about the intentions of the district, being intentional around the strategic goals of the district are important,
Right.
and then telling that story regularly. And so, having capacity to tell stories. Our district uses several models. Our buildings have monthly newsletters that go out that can tell those stories for you.
Okay.
Our district office puts out a quarterly called the Baugo Schoolhouse,
Okay.
and it's been historically used to be a newspaper that went out to the public.
Mhm.
We try to use modern and less expensive
Mhm.
techniques today,
Right.
but so they go out electronically, but we still honor the Baugo Schoolhouse, and that's our opportunity to tell the story of the district, and
Yeah.
we do that regularly as well. We also know that our teachers are good microphones for what goes on in the district, and so we talk to them regularly about what we're doing. I hold a monthly podcast with my community,
Nice.
or my teachers, to tell them about things that are happening
Good.
on campus,
Good.
and because I know that they're going to tell that,
Yes.
and so that's important as well. And
Absolutely.
so ultimately, you're trying to keep that out there. And I can tell you that it's never enough. I can tell you that it doesn't matter how many times you tell what you're doing, people don't know.
No.
And so being cognizant of that and trying to think creatively about different ways that we can engage the community is important. And so every time we have an opportunity, we do that. I go once a year at least to have a breakfast with the superintendents of Elkhart City. So the city,
Okay.
so this fall will be with
Right.
our Dr. Huff,
Right.
and then Mr. Funston from Concord and
Okay.
myself will
Right.
meet with the community. The chamber hosts
Okay.
that,
Yeah.
and then we can tell our story, so they know what's
Mhm.
going on currently. They'll know what happened
Mhm.
last year, and
Mhm.
it's a forum for people to ask some questions.
Right.
And then we try to maintain good relationships with the news. And that's important. And we have friends on the paper and local news venues that help tell our story for us as well. So,
Does the Elkhart Chiefs cover your board meetings? Do they cover your board meetings?
not often they would,
They would, or
but they do
okay.
when they think there might be something worth
Sure.
noteworthy.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, Ken Fox will cover for me
Mhm.
if he's a good contact for me, so I know I
Sure.
can reach out to him.
Right.
And so although he's predominantly sports, he can always get me in contact with somebody
Right.
if there's something we need to be communicating out. So
Because sometimes they can be helpful. There's a certain segment of the population, they might be the older people, who
that
still
pay
read
attention.
that read the newspaper.
Yes,
And
yes,
so that's an important way for them to get information.
absolutely. And so
Yeah.
and
Good.
all of it matters.
You're covering all those bases.
We
And
try.
it takes a lot of time and thought to do all that. So good for
Mhm.
you. So yes, here's a question about student safety. What role does student safety play, would you say, and how is it implemented here at
Yeah,
Baugo?
well, it is the first priority.
Mhm.
It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to be
Mhm.
safe first,
Mhm.
and so safe and orderly schools is our first goal of the strategic plan. If we can't tie an intention around one of the pillars of the strategic plan, we don't do it. And that's honored by the board, and I don't bring it to them.
Right.
But safe and orderly schools is important. And so, for example, with our project with Wygan, we have two priorities around safe schools, and that's safe entrances on our elementary and our junior high buildings. And so it's been a thoughtful process for us. But our buildings were built in the 60s and 70s, and times have changed.
Yes,
And those buildings hadn't seen modern improvements to meet today's need. And so through the work of this bond and this project, we're able to improve those systems and those safety procedures there to improve those buildings. So I'm excited about that. That's a big one. So
that is a big one. It is interesting how, it's 2025. Things have changed a lot.
They have changed.
About how you enter a building, who can enter the building, when they can enter the building,
who
sees them enter the building.
100%. And you can do it right and you can do it wrong, and you never want to do it wrong. You don't get a second chance at that. And so we have to take that very, very seriously.
Right.
And so,
good for you.
Yeah.
Very good. So what advice would you give other school administrators who might be listening to this, who are thinking, well, we're going to be going through a big project probably in the next 2 years. What advice would you give them? You've already touched on
I would say first and foremost, know what your priorities are, and know what your capacity is. How much can you spend? Right. Yeah, absolutely, and thinking critically about those big items. Our first priority is safety. Our second priority is public confidence. We want the community to be confident in the work that is done in Baugo Community Schools, and so can they see what we're doing? Is it important to them? And you're probably going to hear that loudly through your board, but not always. And so we need to be helping our board ask good questions about priorities and listening carefully to that. So those are, safety first, obviously. What's the public want? Can you afford it? And can you do it now, or do you have to do it later? Those are probably the first things I would be asking. And then, obviously, knowing that there's going to be consequences for those decisions. Are you willing to hold a bond for 20 years, or would you like to hold it for 10? And would you like to consider, the tenure of your time here? And would you like to leave it better than you found it, or would you like to leave it and give it an opportunity for somebody who's coming in after you to impact it themselves? And so all of those are questions I think superintendents should be asking when they think about bond capacity and projects and scope. The other reality is that it is a very competitive time in schools, and you have to be able to create a school system that people want to be part of, and all of that is important. And knowing knowing what that requires is important.
No, absolutely. Well said. Well said. And I think you've done a great job on that, creating a competitive environment. I mean,
we do
participating in that. People are coming here because they want what you offer.
Right.
So that's exciting.
It is an exciting time, and we're working hard. And that's not new here. I can't always take credit for things that are going on, but we do have a great little school corporation.
You do, but you've really added to that. So good for you.
And I appreciate that, and that's kind, and I'll take it. I'll take it.
You should.
Yeah.
You work hard.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But it's important to us that people feel good about our district, and that we are producing a place that they can be proud of, and they can come back to. All that matters. Yeah. So
your people have a lot of pride in your district. I happen to know some Jimmies, and they're always very proud to tell me that they're from Baugo.
Good.
So that's awesome. Good for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today, Byron. I really appreciate it.
Diane, my pleasure.
Being part of our episode of the K-12 Corner. And our hope is that people watching this, school administrators, parents, teachers, whomever, can use this as a resource, maybe connecting them with other people who are having these kinds of thoughts or conversations or problems, depending on what we're discussing. So maybe you'll be contacted by someone who wants to. And
that would be just fine with me. That's okay.
Good.
All right.
So be sure to follow the K-12 Corner, everyone, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And that way you can see all the episodes as they come out. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Not too bad.
No, it's all right.